Who or what shall we trust? God or MDMA? Welcome, Swagatham. You might think that I am slightly off my ruckers in raising such a question. But certainly you would think otherwise if you had seen the news bulletins broadcast by British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, yesterday, devoting a considerable amount of airtime to this news that many of the young people who attended the fateful Nova Music Festival on the 7th of October 2023 managed to save themselves only because they were high on MDMA, which is a psychedelic substance, chemically compounded psychedelic substance. I think it's also known by the name ecstasy. I'm not an expert on this. I could be wrong. Now, some of the people who participated in that festival and who managed to survive that festival were interviewed. And a young girl in particular who is totally, absolutely, passionately convinced that if she were not high on MDMA, if MDMA had not projected her to that high state of ecstasy, and therefore a certain degree of detachment from the world of reality around her, she would have been frozen into inaction by fear and should have simply sat down on the ground and gave up hope. On the contrary, because she was empowered by MDMA, she managed to keep her morale all right and flee to safety. Now, a medical doctor, was also a psychiatrist, was also interviewed by BBC, who agreed with the others interviewed, but also sounded a note of caution, saying that dependence on MDMA can also increase your vulnerability. And the doctor interviewed did not elaborate on the theme, though it should have been elaborated upon, I think. What is this vulnerability? To what extent does it harm you? So this is exactly how items are reported by the media. They project whatever is of interest to them or whatever harmonizes with their culture in detail and make a very passing, feeble mention of whatever goes against their interests. Now, let me try and explain to you the fallacy here, because that will go unnoticed and it's dangerous if that goes unnoticed. The article of faith, if you like, if I put it in religious terms, that this media report seeks to propagate is that the consumption of MDMA, this dangerous addiction forming or addictive substance, which has caused the ruin of many lives, thousands of lives, which has blighted the life of many promising young men and women, which really cannot be justified in any way whatsoever, is that is sought to be legitimized, rationalized, justified using this tragic event, arguing in a somewhat convincing but very specious manner that MDMA saved the lives of many young people. Now, there is absolutely no scientific study on how every participant in that group behaved. There is no attempt to find out if anyone in that group who was not high on MDMA managed to escape. It's very likely that many who did not really partake of MDMA also escaped. But that will not become part of the report because that doesn't carry much excitement. It strikes people as something very exciting to know that MDMA, the consumption of MDMA or the use of MDMA resulted in the saving of many lives. Now, that's great news, isn't it? Now, in olden days, well, not so old really, maybe even 50 years ago, and maybe even today in rural areas in India and within religious groups in general, the report or the interpretation would be different. People would say that God saved the life of my daughter, God saved the life of my son, whatever. That's how it would be put. Now, I'm not saying that every credit should be ascribed to God. For example, when somebody's son scores very high in an exam, that person, in a very unthinking manner, out of habits maybe, or not to sound rather pious, would say that God blessed him with high marks. The real fact that the boy studied very hard in a disciplined manner all through the year goes unnoticed and unmentioned, which is quite unfair. It is not God's business to give to your son or daughter marks unmerited by him or her. That's not God's work. Nor is it in harmony with the character of God. So I'm not arguing in that manner. What I'm saying is the seemingly miraculous outcome of the life of a few young people, maybe a few hundreds of young people, being spared that day, that fateful day when Hamas extremists, terrorists attacked this music festival, being attributed to the potency of MDMA is, to my mind, rather unwarranted. It is ridiculous, it is absurd, and it's extremely misleading. And I regret that a respectable channel like BBC has devoted its airtime to propagate this kind of canard. Now, the idea that a drug can save your life, pushing that idea, also hides another important reality. Before I come to that, let me also raise this question. Should there have been a rave party with MDMA as its added source of excitement? Should a society encourage the consumption of MDMA? What do you think? If the consumption of MDMA is unlawful, is reprehensible, is not acceptable, and should not be acceptable because it does serious harm to the development of human personality and cripples a person's capacity even to work, even to assume responsibility for oneself, then should there be a rave party, the main feature of which is the consumption of MDMA? Is a question that I leave with you. I'm not going to discuss that question any further. But now let me come to the real issue I want to raise. Now, you say, or the BBC report says, that because a certain number of people in the party, in the crowd that was partying at the Nova festival, had consumed MDMA, they managed to retain their presence of mind, and therefore they were able to take the necessary action to save or protect their life, hides another important question. The question is, if you were not attracted by MDMA, would you have gone there in the first place? Now, I really have no evidence to prove that the young people who went there only because of their addiction to MDMA and not because they were interested or also interested in music. They may have been interested in music. But I know one thing for sure: a person who is very fond of music, a person who loves music, but who does not believe in the special state of excitement that the use of MDMA can impart, will not go there. It's not your love of music alone that took you there and exposed you to this grave danger. You may have gone and attended a music party elsewhere. There are many concerts going on in many parts of Israel, including Tel Aviv. This is not the only place where good music can be had. So surely, at least an overwhelming majority of the young people who attended the Nova Music Festival were attracted because of MDMA. And therefore, I'm quite convinced that what exposed them to the danger was their addiction to MDMA. There's no doubt about it. Which is better? Keeping away from life ruining substances like drugs like MDMA, minimizing, if not completely eliminating, the possibility that you would go to risky places like the site of the Nova Festival, incurring extreme danger to your life, which was not anticipated, I admit, but it should also have been anticipated, given the location where it was, very close to the border. Is that the right? And then, thanks to the power of MDMA, you run for your life, and some of them manage to survive. Is that a better option, or keeping yourself away from all these alluring, tempting things, but retaining your love for music, attending music concerts in other places where you are safer, which is better? But that question BBC will not raise. Now, I have to admit that when I was young and I was a student at St. Stephen's College, that college was in a very bad shape as far as the drug culture was concerned. Almost everyone, let me say this, almost everyone partook of drugs. Almost. There were exceptions. And many attempts, orchestrated attempts for me to drag me into this dark den. But I refused to. I refused to oblige, I refused to participate. I was told that if I, had the benefit of these things, I would attain a very high level of excitement, creativity, inspiration. I said, you keep all that to yourself. I can manage very well without all of those. I can manage very well with my native abilities. I'm quite confident about it. And I proved it. And that's also the reason why I became the principal of St. Stephen's College. Let me say that very, very clearly. So this idea that drugs can induce certain very high levels of awareness, creativity, performance, etc. is bungam, absolute bungam. What is the scientific basis for saying that the person concerned, if she had not consumed MDMA, would not have fled with due velocity to a place of safety? It's only an arbitrary, random assumption that if she had not that feeling of high, she would have been frozen into inaction or paralysis. It's a random assumption. There's no empirical basis for it. As a matter of fact, all these drugs undermine your sense of reality, which could make you all the more dangerous, all the more vulnerable, all the more vulnerable. That's the reality. So, for a respectable channel like the BBC to lend itself to this kind of absolutely misleading, totally retrograde, absolutely ethically responsible propaganda is most regrettable. And I feel that BBC owes an apology to the global community for doing this kind of utter irresponsible journalism. And I would certainly warn my young friends and request them not to allow themselves to be influenced by this kind of dangerous propaganda that masquerades itself as dispassionate journalism. This is not journalism. This is actually antisocial activity. And to think that BBC of all channels can stoop to this level is shocking beyond words. Well, be careful, be vigilant. Thank you.